Um, okay, I assume most people got that notification, and we can go ahead and get started. If something comes up, feel free to uh, put it in the chat, or let myself or Anna know that you can't hear, or if there's any sort of technical difficulties, that would be helpful. But welcome. Hi, my name is Margaret Miller, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm an air quality planner and forester with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. In my role, I'm the lead for smoke management, so I work closely with our agency partners to develop and assist in the implementation of the Oregon Smoke Management Plan. However, like many state workers, I wear a lot of different hats. So I also lead efforts related to biomass utilization, and am on the state's wildfire smoke response team. So we're here today for an informational webinar on the recent request for proposal that DEQ released related to smoke mitigation and alternatives to burning. This is a component of the Senate Bill 762 funding plan that was developed by DEQ with input from the community. Some of you may have joined us for our informal input session on this funding plan in August of 2021, specifically August 31st. But if you didn't, you're going to kind of get an overview of this component of the funding plan. Today's agenda includes a brief overview of fire, smoke management in Oregon, alternatives and mitigation strategies, and then I'll go over the RFP information, including the award structure, priorities and preferences, proposal elements, acceptable budgetary expenses, and the anticipated timeline. I'll follow that up with some information on a different funding opportunity that exists, and I then can answer any questions that you all might have. So first off, I want to start off by saying that fire, both naturally occurring fire and prescribed fire, has a lot of ecological and silvicultural benefits. Fire can slow in the invasion of non-native species, it can thin vegetation, and facilitate the establishment of young plants and trees. It reduces competition among the forest, reduces fuel loads, which can mitigate the risk of wildfires. Fire is an integral component of many Western habitats, and by no means are the investments that DEQ is making in this funding opportunity meant to discount the role of fire on the landscape. Fire will continue to be utilized. However, DEQ and our partners believe there is an opportunity to invest in alternative burnings and emissions reduction strategies. So obviously with fire comes smoke. So what is smoke? Smoke is made up of a complex mixture of gases and fine particulates that are produced when wood and other organic materials, fuel, burns. Smoke primarily consists of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, water vapor, hydrocarbons, and other organic chemicals like nitrogen oxides, trace minerals, and particulate matter. Fine particulate matter, known as PM2.5, in smoke is the greatest concern for public health because it can be inhaled deep into the lungs, where it can cause irritation, inflammation, shortness of breath, and it can aggravate existing heart and lung diseases. So one component of how Oregon protects our air quality is through the management of smoke. There are different ways to produce smoke, including wood stoves, fireplaces, backyard fires, agricultural fires, and then there's also forest land controlled burns. We manage these different types of smoke sources a little bit differently, but what I'm going to talk about today is the fire from forest land burning, aka slash burning. And we manage that through the Oregon Smoke Management Plan. The Smoke Management Plan is a multifaceted plan that is built in collaboration between DEQ, the Department of Forestry, and the Oregon Health Authority. The plan is implemented by the Department of Forestry with support from those other agencies, ourselves included. Approximately every 5 years, we conduct a robust review of the program, and our last major plan revisions were completed in 2019. In that update, several significant changes occurred, including new air quality criteria for smoke intrusions and smoke incidences, adding sections on safeguarding public health and communication. And the goal was really, for these changes, was to try to take those necessary steps to find a balance between addressing the rising risk of catastrophic fires in Oregon through the use of prescribed fire, but while also making sure to protect public health. Localized communication efforts is extremely important and a major component of our new smoke management plan rules. ODF and DEQ are encouraging the development of community smoke response plans, especially for communities that are considered smoke sensitive receptor areas or have routine smoke impacts. These plans, which we call CRPs, which community response plans, develop communication strategies between the entities that conduct prescribed fire, the local public health authorities, and the general public, especially those smoke vulnerable. DEQ actually has funding specific to the development of community response plans. So I'm going to circle back about that opportunity at the end of my presentation, but it is a main component of some of the work that we are doing. So like many Northwest states, Oregon's forest ecosystems vary significantly from one side of the state to the other. West side of Oregon is more of a wet forest ecosystem, where the east side is more of a dry forest ecosystem. With that in mind, our current smoke management plan regulates both in terms of geographic location, ownership, and forest land classification. Basically, there is level 1 and level 2 regulations. Our rules also protect class 1 visibility areas and those smoke sensitive receptor areas that I mentioned, which those are areas that have routinely been impacted by smoke, so they get the highest level of protection under our plan. So those are in the blue dashed lines. Our class 1 visibility areas are the areas like Crater Lake National Park, or some of those beautiful areas that we're trying to make sure that they don't have visibility concerns. So there are 3 different types of forest land burning that happen in Oregon. There's understory burning, broadcast burning, and pile burning. Pile burning makes up the far majority of the burning in our state and is more of a fuels reduction and disposal technique, and doesn't necessarily have the ecological benefits that broadcast burning and understory burning have. DEQ and ODF encourage land managers to use practices that will eliminate or significantly reduce the volume of prescribed burning necessary to meet their management objectives. When prescribed burning is determined to be necessary to achieve the forest management goals and objectives, land managers are encouraged to use emissions reduction techniques. All of this is outlined in our smoke management plan. So, sorry, I think my slide went haywire. Okay, there we go. So non-fire fuel treatments involve mechanical, biological, or chemical methods that offer advantages in terms of greater control over the outcome and reduced risk of unintended consequences, including air pollution. Like I mentioned, we encourage land managers to explore these options. Some practices to consider include, but aren't limited to, maximizing the cost-effective use of woody materials for the manufacturing of products. So think posts, poles, roundwood, biochar, etc. Where cost-effective, using wood and other biomass for energy production or mulch, or lop and scatter of limbs and other woody material to maximize contact with the soil in order to speed up breakdown. Emissions reduction techniques can significantly mitigate smoke, and some of these, which we call ERTs, emission reduction techniques, are described in Chapter 629, Division 48, 210. Potential prescribed burning smoke mitigation options that may reduce emissions include, but are not limited to, the removal or redistribution of fuels to minimize fuel loads and reduce smoldering, fire layouts that allow for controlled rapid ignition, or fire layouts that allow for increased mop-up. So as you know, Oregon legislators passed Senate Bill 762, which the goal is to help Oregon modernize and improve wildfire preparedness through three key strategies: creating fire adapted communities, developing safe and effective response, and increasing resilience on Oregon's landscape. Senate Bill 762 provided funding to DEQ to enhance communities' readiness and mitigation capacity for smoke. DEQ has set aside $400,000 for projects that demonstrate non-fire alternative treatment options or prescribed burn smoke mitigation options that reduce emissions. We are now currently accepting proposals. And here's where I'm going to kind of go into the details about the request for proposal. I'm happy to answer any questions about Senate Bill 762 if you have them. But you can also find the full literature for that bill by just simply Googling Oregon Senate Bill 762. So our anticipated award structure is that we plan on awarding approximately 2 to 3 projects at grant amounts up to $200,000. And we anticipate that these will be projects that run about 12 to 13 months. So the project period is March 1st through 2022 to March 31st, 2023. Unfortunately, our funding is earmarked for this biennium and does have to be used within this biennium. So that is why they are going to be kind of quick overall projects. But we may be able to get the contracts established a little sooner. It'll just depend on, our contract negotiation and where we end up in the queue at procurement. So these are sort of conservative estimates that we should have a contract in place by March 1st. So what are some of our priorities and preferences that we're looking for in proposals? DEQ and our partners are interested in projects that are located in or around, so the impact will be in or around communities that are currently designated as not meeting the national ambient air quality standards for PM2.5. So in Oregon, those areas would be Klamath Falls and Oak Ridge. Projects located in or around communities that are currently designated as smoke sensitive receptor areas. You can get a list of those by going to Chapter 629, Division 48, 140. It's also an attachment to the RFP. Projects that create or expand markets for wood or biomass generated by hazardous fuel reduction projects on forest lands in Oregon. Projects that promote cross-boundary collaboration and that have landscape scale impacts, and collaborative projects with strong partnerships. So successful proposals will have detailed project descriptions, detailed partner descriptions. They'll have SMART outcomes and SMART success measures. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time-bound. Data will be collected to document the performance of the project, and it'll include an anticipated and estimated budget. We can negotiate that, but there are some things that are non-negotiable, which includes that we will be requiring a 25% match for this project, which that can be in kind, cash, or a combination of the two. We will not reimburse for travel, but that can be used as part of your required match. And indirect rates must not exceed 10%, and requests are not to exceed the $200,000 limit. So there are some things, I'm sure that these questions are going to come up, so I wanted to add them into my presentation. So DEQ can reimburse for equipment, materials, and capital outlay items. All equipment and materials, the supplies, I should say, must be used for the purpose of the grant proposal for that same general nature. But the capital outlay items that are purchased with this funding, they have a little bit different of restrictions. Those must be used for the purpose set forth in this proposal, but for a minimum of 5 years or for its rated service life, so whichever is shorter. To give you an idea, something would be considered a capital outlay if it was greater than $5,000. So the supplies, which have to be used for the project, would be supplies that are less than $5,000. And everything needs to be used for the project, but there are some stipulations on, after 5 years, you could maybe pivot and start using it in, a different capacity, not in hazardous fuels reduction. But obviously our goal would be that you've demonstrated it's very successful and can continue to be used in this capacity for forever. Like I said in the last slide, we will not reimburse for travel or travel related expenses, but it can be a component of your match. So our anticipated timeline for everything is that today, obviously, we're hosting our informational webinar, and we will be posting this information to our landing page. So if maybe you're watching this for a colleague, or you have somebody in mind that you want to send this to, you will be able to send a link directly to the information that I'm sharing. So keep that in mind. We issued this RFP last week, and so just a short period of time before we hosted this informational webinar. And we plan on closing this proposal on Friday, December 17th at 5:30. The declaration of awarded proposals will happen on Monday, January 24th before 5:30. And again, the contracts issued, I tentatively put March 1st. It could happen in February, depending on how the contract negotiation goes. But it most likely, we'll just say March 1st to make it simpler. And what's not listed here, but I'll reiterate it, is that everything has to be done within this biennium period. And so although the biennium happens end of June, DEQ needs time to do our own accounting for all of the projects. So we actually require that projects end the last day in March of 2023. You'll get 30 days to submit a final report and final invoice. And then that will give us like a month or two to do all of our accounting work. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of room for extending any contracts. And so I would tell people to keep that in mind when they're working on their timeline and their deliverables. So, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, DEQ currently has a different request for proposal out, and this is for a competitive IGA, which is intergovernmental agreement. So this means the funding opportunity is only open to government agencies, and this proposal is for those development of community smoke response plans, which are those communication plans between prescribed burners and local public health and those smoke vulnerable community members. For that plan, we plan on awarding approximately 8 projects at $40,000, and those proposals are actually due this Friday. We had an informational webinar, and we've done some soliciting of it all. So hopefully we get a good amount of proposals in, but spread the word if you know any community that this may be a good project for. I did link to the RFP. That's probably the easiest way to find it, is using that ordeq.org/smoke RFP. And that's because it's a little bit hard to find if you're just sort of navigating our website. So remember that link, and that'll take you right to that RFP. And with that, that is all of the information that I have about this project and proposal, but I'm happy to answer questions that folks may have related to this funding opportunity. And you can just jump on if, or you could type it in the chat, however, whatever works best for you. It looks like, Tamara, are you trying to talk? Because you're muted. You're still muted. I can't hear you. Try, I see that. I hear you now.
Okay, great. So in regards to the RFP, I can just use the formatting on the webpage and use that as my basis for writing up the proposal. Is that right?
Yes. So on the RFP, we gave a checklist and an outline, and use the checklist as your cover page. It's a cover page and checklist, and then the outline has the questions to answer. Obviously, fill in all of those sections with whatever background information, partnership information, and then the metrics. But yeah, that is the outline to use.
And as far as the match, the entity, the item or service that would be matched, and then an approximate dollar amount, is that a table of that would be sufficient?
Yeah, so in the outline that includes the estimated budget, there is a line item where you would put the match and which category you're matching. And so if you plan on doing in kind, or you plan on doing it with equipment, then you should just probably include a narrative of that. So the dollar amount in your budget table, and then a narrative to say, we put 25,000 in the equipment, and this is what it's going to go to pay for. So something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Similarly, just because this might be helpful for folks, if you are going to match with in kind, so maybe staffing or personnel, just make sure to explain, what those positions would be, and how much, and how many hours, and how you equate it to, your dollar amount. So there is a component that says narrative under the template, where it says to just, do a narrative of explaining your budget. So, but also I can connect offline after this with anyone if there's any follow-up questions about templates. Are there any other questions?
Hi, Margaret. Are there any restrictions on using this funding on privately owned land? Like, could there be crossover in terms of, working on both public land and with private landowners?
Yes, so there's no restrictions. This does not have to be on public land. It can be on crossover. Our goal, one of the priorities, is really just more so to see landscape level impacts. So that may cross over to different landowners. And this isn't a component of it, but I do know that there are other funding opportunities currently for private landowners that's going to come from the same Senate bill. So maybe there's a opportunity for to look at those proposals as well, and see if they may complement each other, the work that you're planning on doing. Got a thumbs up for those just listening. And are there any other questions? This tends to happen where you set aside a lot of time just in case there's a lot of questions, and then sometimes there aren't. I'm going to check the chat because I saw. Oh, so I see from Mary Evelyn, there was a question about where on the website can you download a copy of today's PowerPoint. So that will probably go live by, and I don't know if Tim Willerman is on, that's our communications person, but not today, but maybe by Thursday or so, if not no later than next week, Monday. the only delay is that we have to take this PowerPoint and then this recording, and they have to like do some sort of editing because it comes back sort of funky with the like commentary trying to match what I said. I guess, you know, that happens with any presenter. So but it will be posted. And what I did for some of my previous informational webinars is that I sent to everybody who attended this meeting, if you put your email in the chat, and sometimes we can collect it from Zoom, we'll send a follow-up with a link to that and the slides so that you know it is available. But it should be listed right under where you find the RFP information on our website. Awesome.
Hi, me again.
Links in the chat. Would you like me to put the links in the chat, Margaret?
Yes, please, Anna, if you wouldn't mind putting some links in the chat, that would be good. And then I heard that there was another question. Go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask about any involvement that DEQ has beyond just funding the project. Would there be any other expectation of involvement, or being a part of evaluation, just anything throughout the project to be aware of if it were funded?
Well, obviously, when we negotiate the contract, in our priorities and preferences, we want you to outline how you'll measure the success of the project. And so we will be tracking on, whatever terms it is. So if, it's X amount of acres treated, or, X amount of dry tons removed, then we probably will want documentation of that work. But in terms of involvement, we're happy to provide technical support or be engaged on some level of it, but it is not a requirement that you get technical support from us. But we're happy to help, but we will be the administrator of the grant, and we will be checking on things like measures of success.
Right, so be a pretty standard grant process where we are basically just completing our project and then reporting to you.
Yes, we will have like a progress report, and we will have like a final report, and there are quarterly just check-ins. Those check-ins are just to ensure that project timelines and funding are all on track, and that there's no need to change. They're very simple, but for the most part, it's very standard process. I'm looking because I see there's a little more in the chat. So for those of you, there were some links that were put in the chat just to access the RFP, but we will also follow up with an email once the webinar posted. Tamara, do you have a question?
I do. Margaret, on the last presentation I participated in with you, you had some sample programs and things that have been implemented that are similar to what you're looking for. Are there any samples or anything that would show us something similar that is more or less what you're looking for?
So yeah, the tricky part is the last one that you were on was for a project that we had that was duplicated efforts. So we had done work in it in the past, and this is actually the first time we've had funding specifically to mitigation projects and to alternative burning projects. But there aren't a lot of examples, but hopefully that's because there's a lot of latitude to get creative in terms of how you can make an impact to either reduce emissions significantly or reduce hazardous fuels through some alternative to burning. So no example, but maybe see that as an opportunity to think big, But I can also connect with you if you wanted to connect. I always try to make myself available. And actually my colleagues and I have been curious as to, what sort of things are going to get proposed. But we don't know. And we will be inviting our partner agencies to be on the proposal review. So that will, similar with our other proposals, that will include, and obviously it's optional. Some of them are very, very busy themselves, but our sister agencies would be Oregon Department of Forestry and the Oregon Health Authority. So. Are there any other questions? I see maybe one more in the chat. Tegan, I'm happy to schedule a time for us to talk about any ideas that you have and whether or not that, there's any feedback that DEQ can help with. That offer is open to everyone if there's any consultation that people want. Obviously, one thing that we're really interested in is, like I said, landscape scale impacts, demonstration of hazardous fuels reduction, and strong partnerships, whether that be through forest collaboratives, municipalities, or other private or NGOs. I will put actually my email's right there, so never mind. But I guess I can type it into the chat. There was a question about what the NAAQS PM2.5 areas are. So the non-attainment areas in Oregon for PM2.5 in our Klamath Falls and Oak Ridge. So if you Google that, like non-attainment areas, Oregon, that typically will come up. And the other thing to consider is that we do have communities that are no longer, quote unquote, non-attainment, but they have historically been in non-attainment. So now they are maintenance areas. And those are for both PM10, or I think maybe only all of them are PM10. Which is another component of smoke. And so you could look up past non-attainment areas. And if you want to put those links there, that is on our website. Again, it's sometimes tricky to find, but I will make a note and I can link to, those maps. I'm just looking because but I was saying that I will put my email in the chat because many of you have expressed interest in reaching out to me directly, and instead of having to write it all out because it's a very long email, I can type it in. But for those listening on the phone, that email is margaret.miller@deq.state.or.us. Perfect. Are there any other questions? I'm not hearing any, so there's no need for people to have to, stay on for the remainder of the, the last 25 or so minutes. So we can jump off a little early. Wait, I'm seeing something in the chat box. Oh, just thank you. Very informative. Thank you. That's always nice to hear. But yeah, if there's nothing else, we can go ahead and wrap up. And like I said, we will work to get this posted and send a follow-up with everyone, letting them know where they can access this recording and the slides. Okay.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret.
Yes, no problem. Very excited to find out what people propose to do. So Anna,